All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 1:34 for the Board of Water and Wastewater Commissioners at the Harwich Water Department, 196 Chatham Road, Harwich, Mass. On Friday, March 8th, 2024 at 1:34. We have no executive session, no public comments or announcements. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda for the minutes of January 4th, 2024.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second, any further discussion? I'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Thompson?
Aye.
Ms. Donahue?
Aye.
Mr. Goff?
Aye.
Ms. Underwood?
Aye.
And I, myself. Thank you. We have no abatements, no old business, and new business. So the reason we are meeting here on this Friday, after our joint meeting with the board, select board, and the finance committee, was to have an opportunity to review the budget with the changed amounts. I was hoping that the finance director was going to be joining us today, but I guess she's unavailable, and the town administrator also has a meeting scheduled for this time. So basically what I would like to do is for us to come up with or agree on our budget for water and wastewater in regards to the difference between our budget and what the finance director recommended. And I'm assuming we would go back before the select board and the finance committee to have another either joint meeting or possibly meet with one or the other, just to move this along so no one's waiting on us. And again, I felt bad not being able to move forward on this on Saturday, but with the numbers changed and having no discussion, no meeting with us, I think it's inappropriate for our budget to change without a discussion with our board, especially when you're taking monies out of our retained earnings to help subsidize the general fund, when if something happens, then we have to go back before them and ask for those funds back from the general fund. There were several questions. That was one of them. One of them was the $150,000 taken out of our retained earnings for wastewater. My other comment and concern at Saturday's meeting was the lack of a paper trail, for better terminology, for not wanting to move those funds from the general fund to the wastewater fund, and then again to pay the debt. I think it's important to show that, especially going forward, so we can see where we were at and have a little history instead of just, because who knows who's going to be here in 4 years or 5 years. I may not be here in May. So someone saying, oh, we'll just make a note of it, I'm not comfortable with that. I'd like to see it written down. And again, according to Saturday's meeting, the DOR didn't direct the finance director to do that. That was a call she made, which, again, I don't agree with. And I'm sure you all had questions too, seeing that this was kind of given to us on Tuesday before the meeting. So, Mr. Thompson, is there something that you want to go over before we have another general discussion, or?
No, I'm with you. This whole thing, it's like we don't exist.
Well, it does. It was taken that way for sure. So, Noreen?
No, I support what you said. This trail of things going back and forth every year, 1 year debt's in wastewater, another year it's in the general fund. I mean, I don't know how anybody will ever track it, years down the road. But I will say, Gary, you said about the debt that it should be tracked, but I do, we'll get into the specifics, but I don't think the wastewater debt should be in our wastewater budget. That was something that Carol Coppola had done a few years back, and it was a difficult maneuver, so I think I'm just as glad to see it get out. It's just unfortunate that it, wasn't in, came in, went out, so our numbers from year to year budget-wise look like 500,000, 500,000, 2 million, 500,000, but if we can just settle down and keep some continuity. But other than that, I agree with you totally.
John? Good. Judith?
Yeah, I completely concur with everything you said, Gary. I'm very concerned about a paper trail. I think it's imperative that all the accounting throughout the town, but particularly through our department, is transparent, and that needs to happen. That's all I'd like to say. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, let's start with water, all right? One of the top things was our indirects. So, our indirects. So we had an increase to our indirects, approximately $16,000 going between the town administrator, accounting, and the treasurer and collector. Unfortunately, the finance director is not here to explain why the treasurer and collector increased 31%. Now, I'm not aware of anything that we're doing different on our side of this. Have you gotten an explanation? I mean,
no, I have not gotten an explanation beyond, the finance director indicated that she believed that we were historically undercharged for those services, and that was, I think, the basis for her increasing them. The only change that would be impactful on the treasurer collector's office would be the fact that we are going to bond and take a loan for the Route 28 project. I know from my exposure on Phase 3 and all the loan documentation that I've been invested in with that project, I don't know how much work it is on the treasurer collector's office to go out to the market to borrow for the Route 28 project, so that is, certainly an unknown for me. But again, I can't imagine it being that significant of an increase, because I believe they're bundled with the rest of the town's bonds.
Noreen?
Can I just say one thing to that thought, Dan? I'm not sure what, FinCom, the select board, and department heads are getting this year for their budget packages. I got the stuff that was online, but I'm not sure if there's more in the books or less. But what I'm getting at is, a few years ago, there used to be a page per department that was more for display, but it showed if it was a department that got revenue, it showed that, even though it didn't go directly against them. And it also had an indirect line for every single department. But I don't ever, when I was in those discussions, I don't ever remember hearing that indirect portion included any monies for bonding. I've always thought of bonding as being, way up in the on the 30,000 mile level. I mean, I'm not sure what the right thing to do is. We need some advice. So I'll just leave that there. You know what I'm saying? If you were to take every $20 million, bond and rip it into pieces by which department it affected, I almost can't even envision that,
Yeah, I guess I don't disagree with any of that. I think, or I guess, from rewinding to like a basics thing for indirects, right? I guess I see these, percentages and chargebacks as a reflection of the amount of their work week or work year that is spent on, water-related items. I would consider, if there's an additional workload associated with the water borrowings, that in maybe the year in which all that administrative work takes place, getting the loans, getting it all set up, there may be a slight moderate increase for additional work, but I would feel that once we're beyond that initial loan initialization period, that percentage would then drop back down and be maintained as it was previously.
No, it sounds like we're in agreement. to me, it's a very different expense than like paying for one of our employees' health insurance, you know, something like that is very obvious and clear, so my only thought on that. One question I had, on these that you included in the packet, did we go up, I didn't have time to calculate it, did we go up 8% from 23 to 24, the 759? So this year is the same 8%, just by coincidence, the
Yeah.
way it happened, okay.
So I guess my other questions would be the property and vehicle insurance. An estimated increase of 15%. Again, is that just our department? Is that town-wide? Is everyone's insurance and property going up 15%?
Question I don't have the answer to. I mean, and that was, I actually had a discussion, a brief one yesterday with the town administrator and the finance director over the phone, with regard to the indirects on water, wastewater, as well as debt for water, and I think those are the three subjects. I did raise the question about the 15% increase on property vehicle, and I said, look, if the town's vehicle and property insurance premium went up 15% year over year, then that makes sense that ours would increase 15% year over year, because we didn't increase any of our assets, our valuation, right? So I had asked that question, and the response I got was, well, property and vehicle insurance went up a lot. But that doesn't tell me if it was 10%, if it was 15%, if there was actually a formula in which this was all based on. I did, as I prepared the FY16 to 25 indirect comparison, was able to locate in the old indirect expense spreadsheets the tables that were used to determine what our property vehicle insurance proportion was. I don't know that that methodology has been carried forward on an annual basis. It may or may not need to be something that's recomputed every year. It may be something that we need to look at when the town adds an asset and the total town valuation goes up, and that could, you know, skew our percentage of the whole. But again, I was not provided with that information as to the specific increase.
Well, I understand insurance went up because my insurance went up too, but I have a number and an example, I guess, of why it went up.
Yeah.
There's no rhyme, there's no reason for it. A meeting should have been taking place before we met Saturday, so we could have had this discussion and then understand what these changes are. You can't just put this on and expect us to rubber stamp it and move forward. And I don't know the solution to this, because I'm not gonna vote in favor of this budget like this without a discussion on it. What I would be willing to do is go back to the methodology that we've used in the last, 8 years here, nine years.
Yeah.
Let's stick with that methodology for now. Present that budget when we do meet with the select board and the finance committee, or both, or however we figure it out. Present that budget, and then have the company come in to do the indirect audit, and then follow up with the select board and the finance committee to come to some kind of understanding of where our indirect should be. But, 31%, 23%, 15%, and maybe they're accurate, but with no explanation and no discussion on it, I don't feel comfortable supporting that. And I was hoping the finance director would be here so we could figure these numbers out today, put this together, and then meet with the boards and move forward instead of holding things up. So I don't know how the rest of the board wants to proceed with this.
Well, I mean, I don't like the situation at all, and it just seems like we go from one situation to another, for the past 3 years that we don't like. But I was willing to go ahead and approve based on the numbers that Dan got over the phone, at least the wastewater budget, or maybe to have Dan bring it back. It's hard to vote with stuff on scrap paper, because we have a meeting already scheduled next Thursday. So I was, willing to do that. As far as the water side of it goes, I'm really perplexed as to what to do. Again, these are, just numbers that,
Well, at this point, we definitely should have a conversation. But we can't put together a budget to run the water department if they're just helping themselves to it. We take on wastewater, how much is that intermingled with the water?
Yep.
We get nothing for guidance from them. It just, the whole thing stinks.
Throw that out there, Alan, you reminded me of one of the things that Mark Abrams had mentioned or noted it in his enterprise fund class, is that the enterprise, or the indirect chargebacks, should be developed based on a policy. And although the town hall can charge us for departmental services that they provide, we cannot charge them for services that we provide.
Cannot?
Right. However, a policy can be adopted to take into consideration other things. For example, my time spent on general fund wastewater projects that may serve as some offset for departmental chargebacks that we are seeing from the general fund. Now that, again, I think is a big policy discussion that should be had amongst this board and the select board.
right.
But,
And considering we're at the start of a new phase, well, not the start for you, but, that's gonna be a huge amount of your time, once again.
Well, the attitude is, from what I can see, it seems like at the town hall level, they assume we've got gobs of cash down here. We can help yourself, I'm just troubled by that. Why didn't we have a meeting? Why didn't we have the discussion? To just do it.
and I would say, I think some of this is, I don't know that the finance director was fully informed as to the responsibilities of the water commissioners, the fact that you guys are a duly elected board that have your own discretion and financial oversight. I don't know, how things were at the town that she was in previously, but I think that could be a source of some of the confusion that is going on right now, because historically, maybe in the other town, those decisions were, she had indicated she had thought that, this board was an advisory board, which, as we all know, it's not.
And again, that's where a conversation should have come into place beforehand. So, all right, so are we say, and again, I'm just gonna go on the record again, back in 2019, our indirects for the town administrator alone went up from, 2016, they went up to $26,000, and we had to have a meeting with the finance director at that time and the town administrator at that time to have a discussion that, and our indirects dropped by $12,000. So there is room for discussion, there is room for explanation, and just because you put a number in there doesn't justify the charge. And maybe these charges are justified. Well, with no explanation on it, I'm not gonna vote in favor of it or support it. So, Judith?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay? Yeah. And maybe I should know this, but is there anything in writing yet about the wastewater enterprise, let's say system, or does it match the water enterprise fund? Not, but the working the operations? Was there a decision made that the wastewater operations, including the funding, et cetera, would mimic the water side?
So
Has anything been delineated?
that is from what my understanding is that's all ultimately a Mass General Law. So there are provisions within the Mass General Law that are specific to enterprise funds, be it a water enterprise fund or a sewer enterprise fund. And those are consistent with both water and wastewater. I think that...
So is this budget filling that, or I'm just trying to make sure I'm understanding.
So there's really two or three things at play, I guess, that I would kind of, I feel. One is we have the enterprise fund, which is governed by Mass General Law. We have the Harwich Charter, which, delegates certain authorities and responsibilities to different departments, boards, and commissions. And then we have our own internal policies as to how we manage and operate the funds. Our policies are not in conflict with any of the other, the Mass General Law or any of the other items, but they are our policies. And I guess to build on that, with the enterprise fund, at least since I've been here, and I think you all share the same sentiment, is that if we're going to use enterprise fund money, it requires a vote and approval of this Water Commission, right? And that's how we have operated since we went back, at least since I started. The reality is that Mass General Law does allow the Select Board can put an article on town meeting warrant that does propose the use of enterprise fund, so long as it doesn't violate the statutes in Mass General Law. For example, the Select Board could propose to include $200,000 of our sewer retained earnings to fund the FY25 wastewater budget. This board couldn't do anything really to prevent them from proposing that at town meeting, aside from on town meeting floor stating the board's opposition. So they are within their right, so far as I understand it, to propose funds to be used. That said, the way in which it was done this year is inconsistent with policy, and it doesn't reflect the way in which this board, as well as the Select Board, because I believe that there has been a respect amongst the two boards that if we're going to dip into the water enterprise or have a discussion about it, that the Select Board look to the commissioners as the responsible entity for that money. I don't know if that confused things or clarified them, but that's kind of my understanding of how it all plays in with general law, our policy, and the town operation.
Can I add something to Judith's question? So Judith, your question about whether like one side water mimics wastewater, the only way I can answer in general is that there should be a consistent methodology amongst all the departments, water, wastewater, harbor, whatever. They don't even have to be enterprise funds, with the difference being that, each line gets used more by each individual department. Harbor may have a tremendous use of the town accountant. I don't think they do, but you know what I'm saying, as opposed to, golf may not, so they're, yes, in a way, they all mimic each other by state, regs or guidance, but, no, they won't be the exact same percentages for each thing, if that makes any sense.
Right, and if I can throw out another analogy on Maureen's point, the indirect expense cost chargeback for the wastewater enterprise should be substantially lower with respect to the treasurer-collector than for the water enterprise. Reason being, on the wastewater side, we only have 250 customers, a significantly lower burden of bills and things that department provides for the wastewater department. Whereas on the water side, we're issuing over 40,000 invoices a year, and that requires a much greater workload for the treasurer collector's office. So the percentages between departmental chargebacks between water and wastewater would be different. However, the way in which they're governed is the same.
That's, thank you, both of you, that makes it very clear. So couldn't we, here's just an idea, couldn't we send back a suggestion that, that those costs be redone based on just what you said, Dan? And
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly go, so unfortunately, the majority of the indirects are, the majority portion is not the departmental chargebacks. The majority portion is tied to retirement, property vehicle insurance, health insurance, and I don't have access to the actual numbers or what is being used as a budgetary estimated number to then go back in and recompute. Now, we can certainly push to go back to the departmental chargebacks that were previously used, the percentages from prior years, which I think I had done that exercise earlier. Oh, yeah, I think I did it a couple weeks ago. It might have been when me and Gary were meeting, I can't remember, but if I remember correctly, it was only like 16,000. Gary, you remember when we had looked at what the departmental chargebacks were? It was on your, I think you left the paper out here.
I had 16,000.
Yeah, so if we used the old methodology for department chargebacks, it would lower the $100,000 81 figure for FY25 by $16,000.
okay,
Approximately 16. So that would be $84,081 approximately.
Yeah, which would reflect the cost of living adjustments to the salary at the same percentages.
Quick question, Dan. This part in the packet that says like fiscal year 2016, what's the?
So that was the deliverable from the original indirect expense study that was done back in 16. So I put that in the packet just as kind of a historical document to show this was the methodology that was ultimately employed from 2016 forward. So that's the initial supporting document.
Okay.
Now, some of those percentages have changed. You know, we're no longer being charged for engineering or surveying department. We're no longer being charged for the health department. We knocked down the charges for the town administration office. And we have since doubled our contribution to the treasurer collector's office when we went to quarterly billing. So we have made changes to this methodology, but they've always been done in coordination with administration and the finance department.
Yeah, we went up almost, what, $18,000 in FY29, I mean 2019, and I'm assuming that's when we went to quarterly billing.
Yes.
I mean, I understand that makes sense, I get it. I don't understand another $12,000 from FY24 to FY25 when we haven't increased anything.
Right, and I said that very thing to the finance director, and her response was that she believed that we were being undercharged in the past.
But that's her opinion. Where's the documentation on that?
What formula does she go by?
I have not been able to locate it. I mean, that's, I think,
I don't want to die on this. So what's the board's position? The board want to take a vote and support this budget? And I don't think it's up to Dan to go.
Then we send it back for the input that we want to know where they're new numbers. They should be validating these numbers. That's an accountant's job, like,
Well, that's why we asked to have the finance director here today to hopefully resolve this today and put something together today to move this forward. I don't really want to ask Dan to go back and go through everything, trying to come up with a budget that it's not his responsibility to do that.
So one of the things that.
is there any chance to get a liaison on the phone?
I'm not calling liaison right now.
Can you push for them?
Any chance to what? I didn't hear.
Call our liaison.
Oh.
I invited him to the meeting as well. He couldn't make it, so I'm not calling him.
So when I spoke.
Okay.
When I spoke to the finance director yesterday, she was of the opinion that we are too far along to make any substantial changes, and that she wanted me to relay that we pretty much have to deal with the 886,099 that is currently in the budget.
What does that mean? 886?
That's the
Indirect number.
indirect number.
A lot of.
We're too far along.
Just relaying what I was doing.
Yeah, I would push back on that and say, you know what, town meeting is not next week.
That's the only way to do it. You have to make a
So-
motion, tell me.
So if the board wants to take a vote on the new budget, I'm happy to put that out there. I will be voting no. And if we need to amend the budget on town meeting floor, then I guess I'll have to get up and amend it on town meeting floor, because I'm not gonna sit back and tell me we're too far along in March.
I agree.
What I would say to what you just said, Gary, is I don't even look at it as being in March. You know, Dan had his budget prepared early in December, and I believe he might have gotten the indirect number correctly in January or February, I'm not sure.
I think it was December 26th,
Okay,
and we
but-
discussed it on January 4th.
Right, but I mean, you know, that's when the conversation should have happened, and there would have been plenty of time.
So what's the board's pleasure? Do you want to vote the budget, the water budget?
Before we consider voting the water budget, if I may just reintroduce the topic of debt. We had discussed paying for a portion of the Pleasant Lake Tank project out of retained earnings instead of bonding the entirety of it. We do have in the FY25 budget a number included within the $700,000 of debt service that we're anticipating. There's about $35,000 of that that is attributed to the Pleasant Lake Tank project. So if we wanted to fund a majority portion of that project from retained earnings, we would be able to ultimately lower the debt figure in that line item. I was planning to have a bigger discussion on this at our meeting next week.
So that would have to be part of the motion? That would go right in?
Well, I could try to do it on the fly, but ultimately we'd be reducing this bottom line number, the 2,642, in the amount of the debt that would be taken off. But again, I was intending to have this discussion at next Thursday's meeting.
Right. The 2642 is what? Oh, yeah, I got it, okay, never mind.
So,
okay.
I see. I'm with you. So we'd be adding 35 onto that?
subtract. Right now, this
Oh,
number
that's
is
in there.
inclusive
Okay.
of the P Lake tank, so we would reduce our overall expenses by that. Which again, I don't want to rush anything. I think if there's a consensus that we're likely going to be having continued discussions on this, I think it could wait until next week, but
Well, whether it's today or next week, that particular piece of it, and we may not approve the budget, but that piece of it, I would approve, because we did have a couple of discussions about debt and projections and had kind of a general consensus that we might, use some, and if we get it in this year, that will keep paying and bonding for the water tank cleaner, if we don't have 1 year with 35 and then, so I would support those 3 lines, but I don't know about supporting the whole budget as a whole, so that's my answer.
So Dan, what's number we're looking at?
So if you're on this page, it is page 2 of the 25 Water Enterprise Fund budget.
If you have this one in water.
Oh, I have it, this is page 2.
Page 2 of 2?
Yeah, page 2 of 2, and at the top, it starts with OPEB, and then long-term debt, interest on long-term debt. So the 2 big numbers there, the 465 and the 307 in the debt columns, would be lowered by, I believe it's 35,000.
All right, I have.
Why is there that jump?
What was that?
Why was there that jump between 2024 and 2025?
So that is new debt for both the 28 water main replacement project, as well as
Okay.
the small chunk of it is for the Pleasant Lake tank project.
Yeah. And can I say something more general, Gary?
Yep.
And I mean this very politely. Maybe, I don't know if it would be you or Dan, but, there are professional accounting companies that will come in, like an attorney's office, and they will help an administration that needs to get stuff like this done. They hire them as temporary. And I would see the town spend money on something like that, but rush through this budget season and not have a good budget. I'd just like to, put that out there for them to be thinking about, right?
So they actually do have an ongoing contract with a consultant who is aiding the finance department, and I know that they had just appointed, they just appointed an interim treasurer collector who I believe is supposed to be starting next week. So I know that she is the interim treasurer collector is going to be handling the borrowings from this point moving forward. So I know that that's at least somewhat in the works.
Yeah. Well, that's good that they have a consultant in there helping. Because there's no excuse for somebody saying you need to accept it. That's not it.
All right, what's the board's pleasure here, so we're gonna move on?
And one more quick question for Dan, if I could.
Yep.
So Dan, you said that the old methodology would lower the water indirects by 16,000. But was that on the top portion
Yes.
only? Okay, so it was not, so on the bottom portion, it might actually be considerably more.
It's an unknown,
Okay.
really, and that's what is
Okay.
going to be the difficulty in all this, is trying to garner the supporting statements and information to then back into what those numbers should be.
Okay, so another thing that I just want to say quickly is that, as Dan said, whether we approve something or not, I believe it goes forward. I don't believe not vote.
I absolutely agree.
Right, it doesn't, so, I was leaning, my background in finance, you always want things to be done and to be neat and everything else, so I was leaning on eating the money without explanation, quite honestly, but now that we've discussed it, and that would buy us more time, because otherwise maybe we won't have any leverage to ever get a proper discussion and a proper method going, including writing our own indirect policy over the next few months with the help of whoever. So that's where I am now.
So again, just to reiterate, even if this board does not support the budget, the select board has every right to bring it to town meeting as presented with the finance director's changes, and the only option we would have at that point is to make our amendments on town meeting floor in writing to the moderator prior, because he likes it to be written down prior to it being heard, and argue our position on town meeting floor. Hate to go that way. I'd rather have a conversation, discussion, and be in agreement when we go to town meeting, but if that's the route. And for someone to say we're too far along, it is what it is, that does not help. That does not help swallow the pill. So, that's my position on it. So is Noreen.
I would just add one tiny piece to that, it's only a detail, but I'm going from memory. Our article usually says, presented, does it usually say presented by the Water or Wastewater Department? We would have to, make sure that it says brought forward by the Board of Selectmen. It's just a detail,
No,
but,
you're absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Trying to look quick, give me 1 second for a recent article.
See if I can beat you.
Yeah, you can definitely read me, I got piles everywhere here. And it's probably not the same every year either, so.
I got the 29.
Article, to see the town will vote to raise it,
But I
to pay the
mean,
water for, by request of the Water and Wastewater Commissioners.
that's what I'm saying, we don't want that in the warrant if
Right.
we're not gonna approve it. And I just quickly look back at some of our other meetings because it's hard to remember everything. And I do not believe we ever took a vote on the, budget. Which is good, I'm just saying, I didn't wanna,
Well, yeah, I mean, things were in flux for a long time.
Right,
We were waiting
yeah,
on indirect
yeah.
numbers, and then we were waiting on...
well, sometimes we do one, I think we were gonna have one and then we didn't have a meeting, so that's actually all good because we were in flux.
We can't wait till a little before town meeting. I mean, we're getting close,
Yeah,
in fact, probably this month we would have voted.
All right, any other discussion about the wastewater, about the water budget? Hearing nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to approve the water department budget as presented for FY 2025.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the wastewater budget,
Water.
the water, wastewater budget as approved on, was it January 4th, 2024? Was that the cut?
FY 25,
FY 25, yeah, I would say as presented, if
as
that's
presented.
the discussion, yeah.
Yeah, 2025, yeah.
I'll second for this,
As,
Hold on a second.
sorry.
Everyone, hold on a second. So, Mr. Thompson made a motion to approve the water budget, not water and wastewater. So we're voting on the water budget for FY 25. Mr. Thompson made a motion to accept. Is there a second?
I'll second for discussion.
I always ask for discussion, so there's a second.
Yes,
Any further discussion?
yes.
Noreen?
So I think we need to reference which one, because I heard Alan say January 4th also, so which actual budget are we voting on right now? Okay, let me find that one.
is this,
The Excel budget that was included in the packet is the...
so this would be the 3/8, March 8th proposal? No?
So are we talking one with the total expense 4891?
659?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so my issue is, if we approve this, it's our, it's our internal document at this point. It doesn't match anything from town hall, so,
No, this should jive with what
Okay.
town hall has presently.
right. So in that case, I would say, I thought Alan was referring to an older one from you that we did agree with, but in that case, I'm fine because we would be voting against this one, if we so feel that way. Okay, thank you. But should we deduct the 35,000?
that is, I don't want to recommend you do it right now, because that was, as much as I agree in
Right.
concept that we should do it, I was intending to bring it back with the rate table that we had looked
Okay,
at last
yeah.
meeting, showing
That's
the
what
debt projections.
Using it all. Yep.
I think that there's consensus that we're gonna move forward that way, and I can, work with Christie to get the debt schedule to reflect $1 million from, or $997 from water retained earnings, and the remaining balance from, debt service. But I wouldn't, until we're able to look at the full picture, because it may not go down the full 35,
Okay,
and then we'll have to read it again.
that's all I had.
So there's a motion to accept the water budget for FY '25 as presented. There's a second. Is there any further discussion? I will take a roll call vote to approve the budget. Mr. Thompson,
Aye.
Ms. Donahue,
No,
Mr. Goff,
Aye.
Ms. Underwood,
No.
and it's a no for myself. So 3 no, 2 yay. All right,
So I guess with that, I can follow up with the town administrator to advise him that the board did not vote favorably on the budget as presented, which reflects the 886,099 indirects,
yes.
and that this board would like to engage in a discussion with town hall about what that figure is going to be.
Yes.
It sounds like a plan.
Or, the last option, which is I'm not favorable, we will make our own amendment on town meeting floor and present our own budget.
and if I could,
Yes.
given the shortness of time in the next month or so, if those things don't happen, if they would just make sure that the article that they put forward does not reference put forward by us, since we did not have a favorable vote.
All right, moving on to wastewater. The biggest, the main concern, issue, is using the $150,000 out of our retained earnings to help subsidize the general fund for wastewater debt, leaving us with about $30,000 in that line item. Now,
May I just provide an update
please.
since then? So, because it's one thing that will ultimately impact that figure is the discussion surrounding indirects with the wastewater enterprise fund. So, last year we had indirects in the amount of $62,147. In that conversation with the finance director that I had referenced earlier,
Give me a second, Dan, hold on. I'm trying to get these out of
Yeah.
there.
Chair.
Okay.
Like this. Goes over there. All right, where are we, Dan?
All right, so this indirect sheet, which was our wastewater indirects for last year, the finance director did agree to book the indirects for FY25. She recommended that we level fund them from where they were at last year.
Perfect.
So we'll be looking at 62,148 for fiscal year '25. That said, when we add those indirects in, it does have a net impact on the overall budget. So we'll increase our total expense line item up from $638,284 to a revised number of $700,432. Also, I spoke with the town administrator this morning. He was prepping articles and motions for the draft warrant. He said the updated retained earnings contribution figure that he saw today was reduced to 100,000 from 150. So if we can just run through the numbers. So we have a wastewater retained earnings balance of $1,114,854. We are going to be using $858,742 to correct the debt line item from last fiscal year. We have an additional $75,000 coming out in capital for the collection system maintenance line item. And then
What? 75's coming out of where? Capital?
for capital, yeah, from the enterprise fund.
All right.
And then there's now a proposed retained earnings contribution of $100,000, which would leave us with a wastewater enterprise fund balance of $81,112.
Can I speak?
Please.
So, you know, I was really worried at the basics of all this, like when we talked on Saturday about going down to 31,000. Not this year, but the following year, just as an example, Dan has to buy a truck for 65,000. And the retained earnings, you know, unless something unusual happens, usually grows very small increments from year to year, assuming nothing extraordinary happens during the year. So it would be impossible to buy a $65,000 truck when all you have is the new retained earnings, which would be probably $50,000. So that was a real problem, because we wouldn't want to be asking the town to buy our equipment when we're really messed up, you know. So hearing this this morning, just because it's getting to the point of like beat a dead horse, you know, or not, I am glad to hear that the indirects are back in and that they're level funded as of last year. So that way we don't have the issues that we just discussed regarding the water department. And that would leave us with the balance of 80,000, which I don't like it being that low, but at least it's enough to buy the truck. So, I mean, at least in theory, it's a working budget. So, for the sake of, and I'm really happy, as I say, the indirects were level funded with last year's number. That takes the mess out of not doing water one way and wastewater another. So, I don't love it, but I would support it.
All right. Any further discussion on the wastewater budget?
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead, Judith.
So it was my understanding that for the first few years, there was going to be, for lack of another terminology, buffer money, like stuff money, that would be there, and it would be significant, not this, it would be a higher number. Did that not happen with the Board of Selectmen? Or Select Board, rather?
The thing is that our retained earnings in wastewater has run for the past 3 years. It was like 250, 240 before that, 270, so it stays around the same thing. But 2 years ago, we gave back to the town 200,000. Last year, we gave back to the town 105,000. We don't make that much every year, so now by giving another 100, that's why it's dropping down, Judith, because we're giving back so much. Which, on the other hand, we don't really want to keep a big pile of money. You know, the town is loaning, not loaning, but...
And that's, to your point, it was
Okay.
kind of there. It's like lending you $100 so that you can, you know, make sure you have enough money for dinner, and then after you buy dinner, you give me the change back.
It's like Sean McGowan, the Pogues singer, used to say, "Give me $10 and I'll buy you a drink." That's kind of...
Okay, all right. Okay.
I do have one question, though. On the correction being made to the motion, that big number, you know, which is kind of paper to us, that 858,742. But I do remember from last year that our superintendent was not invited to the motions meeting. Every year they have a meeting of certain people, the town
Are you
attorney.
talking about water?
I'm talking about everything.
Oh, because you just mentioned the 11, sorry,
Yeah, no, the 858 that we're deducting, it's a correction
gotcha.
from a motion from last year. And that, at that meeting, as, you know, town council, the moderator, certainly the finance director, the TA, and several, you know, other people. Certainly not me, I don't know who's in there. But I was kind of shocked when the superintendent wasn't invited to be one of the attendees. So I'm curious, how did town council make this error in the motion that caused us to have to make an $858,000 deduction?
So, from what I've unpacked from, you know, I guess from there to where we are now, we were proposing to reappropriate money from within the current
Right.
fiscal year's budget at the time to
Yeah.
balance forward, which is something apparently that cannot be done.
Yeah.
So, I don't know,
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
it seemed weird to me last year. Remember, I had a set of motions, everybody had a
Yeah.
set of motion. But I'm, quite frankly, trying to figure out how it got by town council.
yes.
I guess I'll leave
I
it
mean,
there.
I would agree that they should have notified us that that was not an acceptable
Right.
business.
Well, they wrote the motion. You know, I mean, we didn't write it. So, okay. So, I would make a motion to approve the wastewater budget in the amount of $700,432. And that includes, well, I'll just say that amount, that is with what had been presented to this board before, with the indirect expenses put back in, level funded at last year. So 700,432.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Is that even 742?
$700,432.
Got it.
Dan?
Did you want to include anything with regard to the retained earnings contribution, or?
All right, I'll spell it out. You want me to?
Well,
Yeah,
well, I'm just thinking if I'm gonna have to go back
Okay.
to
Let
finance
me-
administrator and say,
let me-
this is what.
let me add to my motion. So, that motion consists of, I've got so many scraps of paper, that's the problem. Consists of us anticipating 50,000 in revenue from customers, a subsidy from the town of 467,485.
550,432.
Say that again, please.
550,432.
Okay. And retained earnings of 100,000 even from the wastewater retained earnings fund.
There's the motion as amended. Is there a second to the amended motion?
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion? Going to take a roll call vote. All in favor? Mr. Thompson?
Aye.
Ms. Donahue?
Aye.
Mr. Goff?
Aye.
Ms. Underwood?
I,
And it's an aye for myself.
Oh, we've got one covered.
Just need a motion. Dan, do you have anything else?
No, I think,
Anything from the commissioners' report? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
second,
All in favor? Mr. Thompson?
Aye.
Ms. Donahue?
Aye.
Mr. Goff?
Aye.
Ms. Underwood?
I.
And it's an aye for myself. Thank you all.
So our next meeting is,